Well, here at Shrewsbury Academy, we use the acronym SPEND because sometimes pupils forget what dates and facts actually are and how they need to revise them. So we use SPEND, which is statistics, places, events, names, and dates. And we advise that they know 5 pieces of SPEND for every section that they need to learn about in history.
Do you go through it with them individually beforehand as an example of what they're going to expect?
Definitely. So we give very, very thorough content revision because even if they have the best structure to a paragraph, because history is very, very tricky, they just have a question and a blank 2 pages to write themselves. Even if they know the structure, if they don't actually know some SPEND, some statistics, places, events, names, and dates, they are going to struggle to fill that space because you can't explain something that you can't actually give a description of.
Would you say that history is probably one of the most difficult as far as memorising what you need to do for an exam?
Yes, that's what my pupils tell me. And even comparing the size of the revision guides, for example, a double science GCSE, the revision guide is a similar size to our 4 components of our course.
How should they approach the timings across the paper?
That's a very good question. So we get them, as soon as they turn on to a new question, to write down the time when they need to finish, and they are very much drilled. The exam board that we do has very specific. 8 markers are always 10 minutes long, 16 markers are always 20 minutes long. So they just calculate when they have to finish, because we say that they gain more marks in the first paragraph than they do by tweaking and perfecting another one. So leaving one blank when you've done a brilliant answer on another one is not great.
Do you ever have a scenario where you've got a student who has a complete blank when they go in because they're so nervous?
We do. I've used a picture of the exam hall, and I've told them to the left-hand side, they need to remember their SPEND, and just if they can look at the keywords in the question and just write down some things that they think might be okay. And I use the idea of shoehorning in SPEND facts that they think might go and hope for the best. And then on the left-hand side of the room, I encourage them to think about the explanation side of the answer.
Now, you prepared a short question for our listeners to have a go at.
I have. So the question is, the policy of appeasement was the main cause of the Second World War. How far do you agree with this statement? Explain your answer. It's 16 marks and it's 4 for SPAG, which means spelling, punctuation and grammar.
Well, the first thing is to really understand the text that you're looking at. So there's 2 sections in each of the exams. There's a reading section and there's a writing section. And you need to get under the skin of what the writers really are trying to evoke or trying to say with what they're doing. And therefore, you shouldn't just rush to the writing section. So they're equally weighted, both sides of the exam. So you really need to think about churning out the cream of the quote, is what I always say. So when you're analysing the language, when you're looking at a good technique, yes, first of all, look at it in terms of a linguistic feature. It might be a simile, it might be a metaphor, but then you really need to zoom in and think about those keywords and explore those connotations. For example, looking at the verbs, looking at why the writer would choose that, what effect it has on the reader.
What should the students in particular be memorising then?
It's not so much memorising, but they do need to understand the techniques that writers use, and they need to have a really clear understanding of the grammar and punctuation structure devices.
Yep.
So if they don't know the basics, I'm afraid, your nouns, your adverbs, your pronouns, your verbs, then you might have a bit of trouble analysing them if you don't know what's what.
Now, we know the students are going to be feeling apprehensive, and I'm sure you've been teaching for a while, Kat. So how do you as a teacher feel?
It is always nerve-wracking every year. I've been doing this for 25 years, but it's having faith in your students and knowing that they can come to you at any point. No question is too silly. So I like to hang around school as late as possible, and they'll pop in and we'll do little one-to-ones. And it always makes them feel a bit better knowing that you really want the best for them and that you believe in them.
What does an exemplar answer include?
I can give you my question.
Go for it.
So I'll give you a very small extract. It's from The Old Man and the Sea by Ernest Hemingway. The old man was thin and gaunt with deep wrinkles in the back of his neck. The brown blotches of the benevolent skin cancer the sun brings from its reflection on the tropic sea were on his cheeks. And what you would be asked is, how does the writer use language to describe the old man?
Science is pretty challenging in that there's loads of content to learn, but also skills that you need to get your head around. So I always recommend students do something that we call a Pomodoro. And basically, it's a 20-minute revision slot where you're focusing with no distractions, phones away from you, which is the challenging part of it. And you just do 20 minutes on whatever you're revising at that point. It could be that those 20 minutes are on past paper questions. It could be that those 20 minutes are doing a bit of reading or learning some facts, a bit of recall. But I always recommend, once you've got that knowledge from the recall, from learning those facts, from using revision cards, in your next slot of 20 minutes, going away and practicing past paper questions based around that. So you're getting that kind of input from learning everything you need to know and then trying it and putting it on a bit of paper. There's a range of different skills that they ask for in the exam, and it's always best to have that practice.
Presumably different techniques needed to revise for physics compared to chemistry and biology.
Yeah, to a degree. There are lots of shared skills across all of them. So in terms of learning the facts, there's definitely a few more in biology than you would find in chemistry and physics, and there's a lot more calculations in physics than you'd find in the others. So you just kind of change what your focus would be. So if you're revising physics, I think it's definitely worth practicing as many calculation questions as you can, making sure you're using your calculator. We teach something here at Sir John Talbot called the physics mantra. And it's just a brilliant way of, when you're doing a calculation question, getting it stuck in your head of what you need to do. And it's a bit silly, but you go find it, write it, sub it, calculate it, and check it. And the idea is it gets the students through this process of finding the information in the question, writing down the equation, substituting in the numbers, which is a really key point that the exam boards are after, calculating it on their calculator, and just going back, checking through to make sure that they're completely happy with their answer.
What should students do if they're running out of time? What's your advice?
On the paper itself, so we always recommend on the science papers, they get roughly 1 mark per minute. So 70-mark exam, 70 minutes. So if they're getting short on time, it's always worth going to the ones where they're confident with, that they can score the easy marks on. For me, I always say the calculations. I am a physics specialist, and if the students follow that mantra, they're guaranteed to get a few marks from that really quickly, really straightforward. The way they stagger the questions on the paper as well is that the challenge always gets harder towards the end. So if they've missed any earlier on, it's always worth going back to check those, because the chances are they'll be slightly easier, but worth roughly about the same marks.
Do you get nervous for your students?
I do. I've done this for a while now, and every year you still get the jitters before they go in and when they come out, and you want to go, oh, how's it gone? Find out all the information from them. Right,
you prepared a short question for our listeners to have a go at?
Yes, as I said, with me being a physics specialist, it is a bit of a calculation one. The question's about a little electric scooter, which is powered by a battery. It says the battery transfers 15,000 coulombs of charge. The potential difference across the battery is 36 volts. And the question asks you to calculate the energy transferred by the battery. It says, use the equation, energy transferred equals charge flow multiplied by the potential difference.
Depending on, the school, the teachers that you've had, the exam board potentially, and the question, there are a variety of ways to really do well in English literature in exam situations. I guess the main thing to really understand is that quotes are king, and if you are focusing on quotations, and if you are, we use quite a lot that idea of zoomed in and zoomed out focuses, or foci, I should say, so that you are thinking about introducing quotes in a clear way, linking to the question, zooming into a technique or a feature, and then analysing that feature. And I guess that's the method. That's certainly the method that I teach across English literature and English language when it comes to the reading skills. We call it what and how and why. So the idea is that the what would be, what is the writer saying, or what is your point? And you introduce a clear point with a quotation attached to that. Shorter the quotation, the better. Obviously, they're easier to remember if you are having to remember them, but also it just gives you more ability to focus on one or two key phrases or words. Once you've got that what, how is the quotation working? This is the thing that a lot of students struggle with. Maybe a lot of students won't exactly know what analysis is and how that is different from explanation. Well, explanation is what and analysis is how. So how is the quotation working? If you were a mechanic and you were trying to do a mechanics exam, you'd be talking about how an engine works, not just what it does, but how it works. And that's an analogy that I use with my students quite a lot. How is the language working? How are the techniques working? As part of that, you'll identify a feature. So you might say the verb or the metaphor or the imagery, and you'll follow that up with an analytical verb like conveys or suggests or reflects or highlights or emphasizes. And that really builds your analysis quite quickly. So analysis doesn't need to be this huge thing. It can be done in a sentence if you're using those analytical verbs. Certain questions where you are asked to really think about the writer and evaluate the writer, that question of why then becomes really important. So you can think about why the writer is using these techniques and what their big message is. If you build a paragraph with those three questions in mind, what, how, and why, then you'll be doing pretty well from my point of view.
With it being an English exam, the last 5-10 minutes, is that supposed to be spent reading over your answers and checking your spelling and punctuation?
It is. You know, SPAG isn't as highly weighted as it would be for an English language exam, but there are still a number of marks available, again, depending on which paper you're doing and depending on which exam board that might differ, but there's still credit given for obviously accurate writing. So you've got to keep that in mind. The realities of being an exam are that a lot of students will feel the time pressure, and that's the most difficult thing about any exam probably, but certainly there's exams where you're asked to write longer responses. You know, in the literature exams that I'm thinking of, we have 15 markers, 25 markers, 40 mark questions. You know, you're not having any question that is less than 15 marks. So that requires a more detailed response. And if you're putting 2 or 3 or 4 of them together across a whole paper, then by the time you get to that final question, you are going to be pinched for time. You're always going to feel like you haven't necessarily got enough time to do everything that you want to do. So it's about building in those strategies as you work, you know, not necessarily leaving everything to the end, but proofreading quickly, skimming and scanning over what you've written to make quick corrections. And if in a perfect scenario you have that time at the end, yes, you know, building that time to check over what you've written. My experience is that time will often be pinched, and sometimes you might not even feel like you have time for a conclusion, for example, for a response. It's not the end of the world. You know, you're not writing coursework essays here or an essay that you've had a couple of hours to compose. So just make sure that you are talking about quotes, answering the question, and saying sensible things about those quotations.
You prepared a short question for our listeners to have a go at, I understand.
I have, yeah. It's not an easy task to do for literature, maybe as some as the other subjects, but I've gone with a Macbeth one just because I think that's probably the common text that a lot of students will study. So here's the question, and then I'll read a short extract. In Shakespeare's Macbeth, who says the following lines and at what point of the play? Life's but a walking shadow, a poor player that struts and frets his hour upon the stage, and then is heard no more. It is a tale told by an idiot, full of sound and fury, signifying nothing. Challenge question is, what is the character saying about existence? And the extra challenge question is, can you identify the extended metaphor used in these lines?
It's not about the number, really. It's about the sort of specific requirements for each question. So if you took a case study about, say, a volcano or an earthquake, it's picking out those really important facts. So basic dates and locations are really important. The number of casualties, the number of people that were made homeless, and really digging down into those impacts and, you know, what happened, why it happened. And for the higher marks, really picking out those sort of key impacts on people and what the secondary effects of those are.
Geography obviously is a broad topic. How can students make their revision more enjoyable then?
I think first off, because it is such a broad subject, and obviously students chose it for their GCSE, they're going to find something that they enjoy and relate to. And geography is great because there are so many things that you can relate to. A lot of the subjects that we do here relates to the UK, and then the more interesting things about the environment, which is a big sort of hot topic at the moment. So relating that to their own lives, but also thinking about the wider world and what's out there. And geography is full of awe and wonder, so there's lots to sort of hook people in.
What should students do if they're running out of time, Matt?
I think focus on learning the key facts. There's such a lot of information that goes across different subjects. So if we look at our case studies, for example, they need to make sure that they've got the causes, effects, and long-term impacts for each thing. And those don't have to be really in-depth. And there's quite a lot of crossover across the different subjects. So that's really a focus.
You've prepared a short question for us, haven't you, for the listeners to have a go at?
I have, yeah. So this is a 2-mark question, and it is explain one economic problem caused by traffic congestion.
The absolute key when you're preparing for your maths exam is you revise by doing questions. So in some other subjects, you might be advised to make mind maps or create flashcards. In maths, the best advice is to do questions. You would be looking at example past paper questions. And there's a couple of really good reasons for that. One is you get used to the wording of the questions. Often the students struggle most with the questions that are put into some sort of real life context. So generally the students understand the maths concepts, but can they apply them to the real life context? So you get used to that doing the past papers. Each maths exam is 80 marks and you have 90 minutes for the paper. So again, practicing past papers, you get this feeling for sort of 1 minute per mark roughly. And so getting that feeling of how long you should spend on a 2-mark question compared to a longer question. And then also, I think one of the best things about revising for maths by doing past papers is it really highlights what you do and don't know. Students, if you let them, would revise the things they like doing. What they should be doing now is realising the questions they've got wrong and then using their resources to revise the things that they don't know.
Do students need to remember formulas or are they provided?
The students will receive a formula sheet. One of the things we'll be working hard on with the students is being very clear the things they don't need to remember, but they need to be able to apply based on the formula sheet. And then after that, there's almost like a second formula list that we'll share with the students of things they need to remember. But there are some things they need to know and some things that they will be given.
If students can't answer a question, how do you advise them? What do you tell them they should do?
The advice in a maths exam is to never leave the question blank. One of the things that we'll be working really hard with students on is if, for example, there's a longer 4-mark question that they don't fully understand, but if they write down the things that they do understand, they could get 1 or 2 of those marks and they might be really key marks, the difference between grades. So the advice would be pick out the key information from the question, do the processes that you do understand, never leave the question blank. The other piece of advice there is if the question's worth 2 marks and you're not sure, don't spend 10 minutes on it. You will need to move on to make sure that you can do the questions that you can do later in the paper.
What made you choose maths, Daniel?
I think I really like the black and white nature of the subject, so you can get some real quick success. You know when you're getting questions right, it's quite quick to move on without wanting to sound cocky in any way. I think if it's a subject you're good at, you can progress quite quickly. Then you do get that sort of nice feeling of having some success.
I hear you've prepared a short question for our listeners.
Yeah, it was a little bit tricky because a lot of the questions would have, needed the listeners to have a pen and paper and perhaps see a diagram. So I've gone for just a short question. Charlie says that the sum of 2 prime numbers is always even. And then Charlie gives an example that 7 plus 11, so there's 2 prime numbers, give the total of 18. And the question worded to the students would be, or the listeners, show that Charlie is wrong.